Hello everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Channel Update. Back on Channel Update, I'm doing something a little bit different for this one. It's going to be the Q&A edition of Channel Update, which is going to be pretty good. This is the first time I've done this. I think that I've gotten like a lot of reactions from the videos in just the past couple of months, and a lot of you have been very loyal and are always commenting, and I always try and get back to you. So if I ever miss one, I'm very sorry if I missed to answer any of your questions. It's not my intention. Sometimes life just gets around and I might miss something. Yeah, anyways, so we're gonna get to it. I'm currently in Australia. It is it's an October edition. Initially, I wanted to actually be a little bit more silly and just go in and read a spooky story or some look at some spooky stories to talk about for the October edition while I was in Australia. Maybe I would tell you a story about how some zombie kangaroos or some koalas just straight up want to just give you chlamydia, because apparently it's a problem that koalas are suffering from. But I decided it would probably just be best that while I'm away and while I'm recording this audio, I can actually just go ahead and do something that I guess you'll appreciate, and that that'll be fun to do. So I'm going to read some questions from everybody who's commented on the channel. I've already probably given some answer to some of these, but I'm just going to extend it or give it a different spin. So here we go. So from Valer, who says, thanks for the video. Can I ask about the timeline of your mod? Because it is based on 3.55, I believe. So is it happening right after Wrath of the Lich King, or are there some zones actually in the past, etc.? Okay. So I believe I answered this, and I tried to give you my straightforward answer. I have a lot more sort of like a relaxed perception in terms of the areas that I'm making. So where there are some areas that I imagine are in, let's say, the future past Wrath of the Lich King, there are some other areas that I think are just at that point in existence, like right at the point of Wrath of the Lich King. So in my mind, for example, when I think about my Kul Tiras mod, and obviously it's very different from the official Kul Tiras, and I'm perfectly fine with that. So if anyone would ever want to use this mod, they would have to kind of be okay with my vision as well. But I would just think, okay, well, this is how Kul Tiras has always been, and this is how it exists right now within the world of Wrath of the Lich King. Does it mean it can be before? Yeah, it can be before, and it can also be after. But I try not to overcomplicate myself about it. I think the way that I approach these mods is, I think about a private server, and I think about, like, I come from like a background of having done like roleplay on some of these servers, and I was a complete newbie to them. And then I started to getting involved, and I got invited to a private server, and I got involved a little bit with modding there, because I did mods for Warcraft 3. And then I realized, as I talked to a lot of people, in these role-playing servers, which is where you get the crazy ideas of what would happen or this or that, they'd always speculate on what would happen if. So, like, I remember Quelimon area, or the area for like the High Elves, was something that was, it's still relevant. It's still one of my more sort of like popular videos out there. Is, can we get an area for High Elves? And I had a High Elf character, and but I also understood that I didn't want something like Silvermoon. I didn't want something as grand. I understood that it was sort of like a dwindling remnant of a race, but I always thought that it would be cool to have this little area, and that's how that came about. So yeah, I mean, you can just talk and modify and fit it into your own timeline if that's what you want. All right, so let's look at Enthused Norseman. I had a couple of thoughts of seeing this video. Hopefully you'll take this constructive suggestions thinking out loud, not pestering. Freshwater sources are a pretty big deal on islands. Maybe a stream, a reservoir or something. I know there's a fountain, but it's not really for drinking. I really like those windy, densely packed districts that you see in pirate ports with a lot of alleyways and a lot of inns. Perhaps it would be able to make something like that in the lower parts of the city. Absolutely 100% enthused Norseman. I didn't intend the fountains to be drinking areas, and they're quite ornate. So I intended that it would always be sort of like these well reservoirs or these water tanks that would be established at certain parts of the city. Probably the water tanks will be in the lower parts of the city or more wells, but I have placed a couple of wells even in the Royal Island. It's just that I really haven't gone to them or shown you them too much. I've been so aware of them that there's another thing that I'm kind of like pesky about, which is I put outhouses. You'll notice that I have like outhouses because one of my things about like going into some of the original WoW towns, especially, you become aware of these things when you go to like a role-playing server and people are role-playing in a town and somebody role-plays going to the bathroom and there's nowhere to go to the bathroom, there's no outhouses. So I made sure that, with some of those details, it kind of makes sense. So there's wells. There's a well around the farm area of the lower island, and there's also some wells behind the houses and the Royal District, and I think there's going to be more wells there. As for the windy, densely packed districts in the pirate ports, that's definitely going to be the lower town. There's already, like, behind the stables, behind some of the houses, and behind some of those, like, not barracks, but those long houses that are closed off with wooden fences. There's going to be an entire back alley there with that I want it to be really seedy, and then underneath the house. You know how on the other side of the island there's like an open area underneath one of these houses, which is a bar? So that same space is going to be on the other side of this alley, and it's going to be completely closed in. And I'm thinking it's going to be some sort of like seedy den, like, I don't know if I want it to be a crack house or something, but it's definitely going to be seedy. So I'm with you on that. I just do want to explain that there is a problem with me currently making streams, reservoirs, or other things, and that is that Nogget currently doesn't play nice with different elevations of water. So sometimes I have to commit to having the water level across the islands be the same, because I can't differentiate between the sea level and water that would be like higher up. So I'd love to have a pond somewhere, or I'd love to have a stream. I could even figure it out. But the technical limitations of the program, or at least the program that I'm using and my own knowledge, is that I can't do it. But if I could, I would. So I'm going to try and think about it and see if I can work around some different things for that. But absolutely, that's where I'm going with the town. Okay, so I got another question from Spalmer. And I just saw that you were also into Crusader Kings 2 player. Amazing. Do you know what a Warcraft Crusader Kings 2 mod will be published? Do you know, I guess, the mod that will be published for November or December? I haven't, actually. I mean, at one point I looked into it, particularly because I saw some Game of Thrones mods for Crusader Kings. I'm a big fan of Crusader Kings. Played it for I don't know, better part of like 3 years maybe. It's one of those games that I never recorded, but I really did enjoy. I mean, I did record a bit, but I never recorded a lot of it compared to the amount of time that I actually played. If it comes out and it looks good and it's stable, yeah, hell yeah, I'll make sure to play it. I might even record something. Okay. We got another question from Vale here. Are you planning to add more town villages on Kul Tiras, or even islands Zuldair and Crestfall in the same zone map? Yes and no. the long story of it was when I started designing the islands for Kul Tiras, I looked at what traditionally had been the shape of Kul Tiras and how it had been designed previously, and what they had done now. So what I decided to do was I decided to mimic the shape of the islands now, except just really scaled down. So if you were to look at the design of my islands from up top, you would actually notice that the two islands at least have the same layout as the big islands in Battle for Azeroth. There's the third island that's missing, and the reason for that is because I believe it's a cluster of 3 islands, at least 3 main islands and BFI, excluding Zuldair and Crestfall. The reason I excluded is because I realized the area was getting very big. So I decided, okay, well, I'll stick to dividing these into the Royal Island, and then a lower town, and then I think it's going to be called Port Town. I'm not entirely sure yet, but those are going to kind of be the 3 areas. The third island, I do have planned on incorporating it, kind of like, imagine if these islands are like Stormwind and a little bit of like Elwyn Forest type of starting areas. I want the third island to kind of be like a Westfall area. I want it to be a separate, larger area that with like little towns, maybe some pirate towns, and that might mean the inclusions of Zuldair and Crestfall. But I also have other ideas. You know how I said that I liked this idea of having these islands have this sort of like Caribbean, like Spanish feel to them? Well, that also makes me think about like, you know, incorporating, because you know when the Spanish came and they got to the New World, they mingled with, well, not mingled. There was the conquering of the natives wherever they went, which is an entire different issue that we can talk about. But the cultures that resulted were kind of like a mingling of both these coming together of the world. So, like, if you go to Mexico, you'll see the Spanish influence, but you'll see the Aztec or the Mayan influence put together. So I thought about, like, dabbing, like, troll artifacts in the lower islands, and it'll just give it this more, piratey feel. We'll see how that goes. As for Zuldair and Crestfall, I remember reading that one of these islands is currently officially considered to actually still be sort of like in the Eastern Kingdoms. I don't know if it's a retcon or not. And Zuldair, there's some deal with it as well. I might look into it, but for the time being, I haven't decided. I really need to finish the city first before I start expanding on other areas. All right, so we have a question from Relay. Hey, dude, I've been watching you and Amonroth NG for over half a year now, and of course decided to create a custom map myself. I have a problem, though. Some M2 models seem to have really low draw distance, the worst being a tree having about a 15-yard draw distance. Okay. I don't really know what to tell you. I don't have the technical expertise to actually modify M2 files and change the settings in terms of their render distance. I think that some of these are actually handled from within the model itself. My best suggestion is, I mean, some of these can be extended by just extending the view distance on your actual WoW. That'll depend on the capacity of your computer. Having said that, though, if you don't have that skill of like modifying the M2s, I think the best thing is just go with another model. Go with a different tree model. Even if you can't find an exact like a tree model as the ones that you're currently using, there's a possibility. Look at all the trees that you have in the game and see which ones have like the shapes that you like, because it's easier for you to learn actually how to make a tree with a separate skin with the colors that you want and that you need, like I did, for example, on my my Suramar build. You have the Weeping Willows, the purple 2-color those are custom textures with trees that are already existed in the game. So I think you're better off doing that, just finding a tree that works or a model that works better off for you, and just learning how to skin it. It's pretty easy. You could probably convince me to teach you how to do that. All right, the next one is from Charlie Payne. Very short question. I thought it was cooler than Wrath of the Lich King Dalaran. Okay, so this is from my Dalaran mod video. My Dalaran mod video was like a cool one because I think it was the first video I did for Warcraft modding on the channel. And it was, again, it sort of comes from the time before Wrath of the Lich King, when a lot of us in the role-playing servers would, we'd go to the Dome in, north of Hillsbrad, and we would wonder what that city would look like. And, of course, you had, these ruins of all these sort of vanilla structures. And so we always thought that it would have been cool if we had the ability to remove the dome and just build the city with these vanilla structures, except paint the roofs purple and add more magic stuff, and that's how that got started. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was an interesting mod. It was the first mod that I really took very far because almost everything in it is custom. But it also had a lot of technical problems, and it was never fully finished. And I lost it, sadly. I don't have it anymore. So a lot of people have asked me if I would be willing to give it to them or share it with them. I don't have the files. I mean, there's a possibility that going through a lot of my old hard drives or disks, I might find something, but I'm not really all that moved going into that. All right, but thanks for the question. Thanks for the comment, Charlie. So from Brian Estep, I love it, but it doesn't even resemble Warcraft 3 Dalaran. It's bigger than the in-game Dalaran, but the structure's okay. Yeah, again, that's Brian. Sorry, I should have probably read these two questions in succession. I actually had them together, and that's probably why. Yeah, that wasn't the the point of it. I wasn't interested in making it look like the that very nice, beautiful pinkish, purplish hue that Dalaran had in Warcraft 3, and it was obviously very different from the structures that humans had and Vanilla WoW. I think they did a great job in Wrath of the Lich King. I think they've continued doing a great job. I don't like the new building that they put up with the Draenei influences. I don't like it. I think it sort of clashes with everything else. I think it was good to keep Dalaran as a mixture of human and elven sort of architectures with its unique colors, and you can actually see that in the development pictures of Dalaran, how they actually mixed human buildings and elven buildings, and then they sort of textured them to be the same. I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, so moving on to another question from Friedman. Hello, friend. Can we play at your server, or is it a playable server? No, it's not a playable server. It's a private development server that I have. I have it to test the mods that I do. I have had people on my server, mostly friends, just to look at some of these things. I've thought about making it into a server, but that's a whole different thing altogether. Having said that, I'm not against the idea of actually giving my mods to some server out there who would want them, but that's a whole different issue altogether. All right, we got another message from Venerable Barrage. I noticed that at a certain time in your video you were in Scarlet Monastery. I have a question. Have you ever thought about building an open version of one set to scale or some variation of it out in the world? I have. The problem with it is how those buildings are set within the game. You have to understand that a lot of these buildings when you go into these dungeons, they use the old way of building for Warcraft, which means that because you were meant to be on the inside of the, let's say, going to the cathedral in Scarlet Monastery, which is probably my favorite area of that entire complex. I would love to have that out in the open world. The problem is that if you look on the outside of the model, there are no outside walls. So if you were to remove yourself and put yourself, let's say, 20 yards away from the edges of where you can walk on that map, you can clearly see through what from the inside look are walls or structures or whatever. So it's very hard to build with that unless you have either matching structures that you could put on the outside. I'm sure that it might be doable, but even if you were to fly over it, it just wouldn't look right. So I think it's very hard. I'd like to do something like that, but I think it's kind of like out of the question for the time being. Frodo Swag says, awesome mods. Are you the same guy who made the Blood Elf, High Elf models for Warcraft 3? Yes. That was, my models went on, I think it was called WC3campaigns.net or .com. I don't remember what it was, but it was a forum. It's pretty much where I learned how to mod, where I shared all my mods. And I eventually ended up being the first person who had a building pack that my first attempt, not my first attempt, it was the last of the culmination of my experience in modding, which I took textures from inside the game and I built structures that looked a little bit like the structures from the Burning Crusade buildings of the High Elves / Blood Elves, and I put a full set out there. So if you've ever played Warcraft 3 and you see like the red domed, golden rimmed Blood Elf buildings, they came from me. No doubt about it. They've spread all over the web. Sometimes I've not been credited. Sometimes I have been credited. In any ways, they should be credited to Sinister X, which was my my name on the forums. But yeah, I definitely did do that. All right, what else? Okay, I guess we're gonna cut it short right about there because I've been talking for quite a bit. In regards to like any additional questions that are like, can you, will you? It all depends. You have to understand it takes a lot of time to be modding. When a couple of years back, when I had more free time, when I was still in school, for example, and all I had to worry about really was getting schoolwork done and my own social life, I was able to do a lot more and be a lot more creative. And I was also, in a creative school as well. So it was more possible for me to do that. Now, especially in the past like 2 years that I've, actually have my other job and that I work with media as well, and I've become very involved. Sometimes I'm tired, and sometimes I work on editing software. I work with graphics and other stuff. Sometimes I don't want to finish work and then come back, and I sit in front of an editing station with 3 screens in front of me all day, and then I go home and I sit down and I have all my stuff in my house as well, because I'm a very techie inclined guy. Sometimes I just want to rest. Sometimes I just want to like crawl into bed or watch a series or watch a movie and not do anything. So it just depends on how motivated I am and how much personal connection I have to some of these things. And believe it or not, a lot of the mods that I do is because I have some sort of like vested connection with it. It's either something that I talked about with friends years ago, or that friends talk about now, or in the case of, for example, Kultiris, it was the reemergence of Kultiris as a playable area before BFA came out, and before we knew how it was going to look, that got me thinking into, yeah, boy, I gotta get on this and make my own version and do it. But yeah, so this has been the channel update. Things are going to be continuing with the WoW modding after this. I realize that right now you've probably seen 2 or you've seen that on the channel I've had tune-on WoW videos, because that's how sort of I planned it, and also a previous channel update. Things will continue. We'll have more mods, and we'll continue with that. You might see some other games here and there. There might be a new game footage being shown on top of or behind this this audio. But so I might do some other things that I like, some other interests. I might show you or talk about other things that I like. But hopefully you'll stick around and enjoy more of that. So until then, everybody, take it easy, and I will catch all of you next time. Bye-bye.